I'm joined by Molly Vorwerck, Head of Marketing at Monte Carlo, the creator of the data observability category. Prior to joining Monte Carlo over 4 years ago, she led tech brand and engineering and the engineering blog at Uber. And before that, she was a journalist with USA Today, San Jose Mercury News, and even more. She resides in the suburbs of San Francisco with her husband, her son, and cat, Maxie. When she's not slinging software or chasing after her son, she loves to read, catch up on the latest true crime documentaries, and scour the world for good coffee shops. Fun fact, she wrote her college dissertation on Elvis Presley. Molly, excited to have you on today.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So before we dive in too deep, would you mind just sharing a little bit about your context there at Monte Carlo, a little bit about your role? And kind of the general org structure, how big you guys are, your core customer, just so people can understand the context around the discussion we're going to have today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Molly. I joined Monte Carlo. And for those who are unfamiliar, Monte Carlo is the creator of the data observability category. And what that means is that we monitor and alert to issues in your data systems. And so obviously, as AI comes to take prominence, that becomes a really big, data quality becomes a really big problem because data is kind of underlying your models and your AI system. So in any case, I joined about 4.5 years ago, leading content and communications. And over the course of the last 4 years, I kind of grew my scope to manage the broader marketing team. So that includes demand generation, events, customer marketing. The company itself is about 200 people. We're Series D, where we keep it pretty lean. We definitely, we have a very much like a sales-led go-to-market motion. But we do a lot of kind of like demand generation and thought leadership and brand awareness and category creation to kind of create excitement and buzz around this category. That's we've done well for ourselves in that arena.
Thank you for that overview. Excited to dig into some of your category creation experience, your content experience. We'll definitely get there. Before we dive into that, would love to just have you share some advice for those, who maybe look at somebody like yourself, Molly, and think, gosh, like I would love to lead a marketing organization someday. Every path into marketing leadership is kind of like a snowflake. I understand that, but would love any perspectives from you on how to prepare yourself, the experiences that can kind of provide a good groundwork for somebody who's trying or thinking about getting into a marketing role as a leader.
Definitely. I had kind of an unconventional, I guess most people have a unconventional and circuitous route into marketing. So I got my start as a journalist, actually. I was a freelancer for USA Today, and I, worked for the San Jose Mercury News. And then I graduated college, and I realized that I needed to make money. And so particularly if I wanted to live in San Francisco, like a lot of my friends were after college. And so I kind of decided that I would go into public relations or at least try my hand at it. At the time, there weren't that many opportunities in tech PR. It was kind of more of like a nascent field. And I found like a video gaming PR agency actually that I thought was kind of cool. I'm not particularly, I wouldn't consider myself a gamer. I did play The Sims a lot growing up, but I'm not particularly a gamer. But a lot of folks that had been to, I went to Stanford, and like a Stanford grad had started the PR agency. And so I was like, oh, this is cool. I'll try this. So I've got my hand, I worked there for a few years, and then I worked at a few other PR agencies doing tech PR for companies like beyond gaming. Like I went into and I did PR for VMware and Ford's self-driving car unit and a few other kind of more deep tech companies. And then after that, I actually, oddly enough, my neighbor worked at Uber and he ran their tech brand team at the time. And the tech brand team was responsible for kind of selling Uber as a place that engineers and data scientists and AI researchers would want to work, because they were competing with like Google and Facebook and a bunch of other like big tech companies for talent. And this was in, like 2017. So it was kind of right before Uber was going public. It was also right at the kind of, the watershed moment when there was a lot going on culturally at the company, and a lot of kind of the you know, brilliant jerks mentality was falling out of vogue, and for good reason. And so I joined right around then to manage their engineering blog and their tech brand team. And it was a really fun and cool experience. And I got to work with some really great leaders like Tuan Pham, who was the CTO at the time, as well as some folks on their like brand and marketing teams. And so I definitely learned a lot there. But my function was not traditionally marketing; it was technical writing and technical brand. Um, and so then, right when the pandemic started, I was kind of at a juncture in my career where I was like, I could stay at Uber and kind of go down this like technical writing or technical program management route, or I could, try my hand at a startup. And so I decided that I would poke around and see what was out there. And I actually saw a job listing for head of content at this company that I, had never heard of. It wasn't even out of stealth, Monte Carlo. This was back in 2020, right at the onset of the pandemic. And I applied, and the rest is history. And so through the course of kind of working at Uber in that kind of unique role where like my job was literally to build a brand around the technology, I kind of found my way to B2B tech, specifically B2B data tech, which again it's a very like it takes a very nerdy person to want to do marketing at like a data tech company. Um, and so I joined Monte Carlo, and when I got in, it was really like my goal was to kind of to write and at the time help them create thought leadership around this burgeoning idea of data downtime, which is the idea that like, if your data isn't accurate or unreliable, you can't trust it, and it costs companies money and all that stuff. And so our goal was to kind of create a name and like a perspective for the categories of technology that we were building to solve this problem. And so I, did a ton of writing, did a ton of research to really understand the persona. It almost felt like I was a journalist all over again in some ways. Um, and then over the course of the next, almost 5 years, we've like, built out the category to be something that Gartner and Forrester and a lot of other third party avenues that we respect validate. And, we have hundreds of customers and Fortune 500 and beyond. And, it's been a lot of fun. But to answer your question, my route to marketing has been kind of, it has been untraditional, and whenever I speak to a marketer, like generally, it's a pretty untraditional path, just because marketing is nowadays it's something you can study in college, but when I was growing up, it wasn't something that I even knew was a career. It was like doctor, lawyer, software engineer, not marketer or B2B SaaS marketer. And so anyway, my advice would be to to really kind of, I guess, treat the opportunity like a massive, uh, a massive problem to solve, particularly if you're going to do startup marketing, because you don't really know much about your audience at all. You don't know anything about the channels that are going to work. In the early days of Monte Carlo, we were just kind of figuring it out. So a lot of it, it's kind of like you're being a journalist in a way, because you have to figure out like who your audience is, what they care about, what type of, headlines or brand or buzz will get them to actually take your company seriously. It's a lot of investigation, and from there it's really trying to try a lot of throwing spaghetti at the wall to really understand what works and what doesn't work, and then leaning in really heavily to what does.
Got it. No, thank you for your background walk through there. Really, obviously, it goes without saying that your journalist background has, I guess, painted your perspective to an extent on how to, execute against content, right?
Hmm.
Um, you also mentioned though that you spent a lot of time with Monte Carlo. You were there as you were creating this data observability category. Uh, I would love actually today, for the most part, to dig into, given your extensive content background
Hmm.
across your journalistic roles, as well as your time at Uber, and now, even at the beginning with Monte Carlo. I'd love to kind of dig into um, how content uh, is how you can use content to power demand today,
Yeah.
because I think there's a lot of growth and marketing teams, demand gen teams out there who are trying to figure this out, because the way that buyers make decisions is changing, and
Hmm.
insofar as content has been a part of that journey,
Hmm.
if that journey changes, then like the role that content plays in that also, to an extent, may change. And that's at least my perspective anyway. And I'd love to hear yours. So like from creating a category to, capturing demand, would love to
Hmm.
kind of hear your perspective. Mind if we kind of dive into those topics today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, early on with Monte Carlo, the goal was always to kind of like create awareness, create a pain, create an urgency around the problem that we're trying to solve before we do any kind of like actual selling of the product, whether that's, reaching out to prospects and outbounding to them, or just like putting together like gated content or paid campaigns or things where people need to opt in to access these resources. And so we didn't even we didn't even launch the product or the company before we started writing content and doing a lot of the category creation. We leveraged our CEO is this really really intelligent woman, Bar Moses, and so her philosophy was always that it's all about building a category, is all about um, creating a movement around whatever value proposition you're trying to sell and the problem that you're trying to solve, as opposed to trying to sell a piece of technology. So at first it was all about organic content. We didn't even really do SEO until like the first couple years in, although that may have been a mistake. At the time, I didn't know a ton about SEO. Like I knew what it was, and we did it to a certain extent at Uber, like for the engineering blog, but it wasn't something that I didn't connect B2B SaaS and SEO, but it's a really strong component of that, and increasingly so now that you know there's AI is affecting like the Google search algorithms and all that stuff. But in any case, so we started really with just organic content that was posted on Towards Data Science. We didn't, which is a Medium blog. We didn't even have a website, so to speak. Of we would recirculate that content on LinkedIn, which at the time was like, in the height of the pandemic, it was like one of the platforms. I think every social platform was like the platform. Like I remember Clubhouse. I remember
Mm-hmm.
there was all that stuff going on with Twitter and X
Totally.
now.
Yeah.
Like it was but social selling was like a really, really, really strong avenue during the pandemic. And so we really leaned into that. And it wasn't about like, oh, you need to buy this technology. It was like, are you sick of your data being broken and impacting, your company's revenue? Are you tired of like being woken up at 3 a.m. by your analyst because your dashboards are broken? Like, and definitely related to the pain. And so we started there. And then, after about a year, we hired our first demand gen marketer. This, again, like my awesome counterpart, Angeline. We call her Demangeline just because she, like, she basically was able to put together a system so that we could distribute this content and distribute these ideas in a way that was creating brand awareness, but also capitalizing at the right moments in the right parts of our webpage to kind of, capture that intent and drive demand. Um, so then we brought on demand generation, and then like things started to open up, and so we started hosting events again. Events are really like right now, like during the pandemic, events they didn't exist. Everything was virtual. Obviously, it took a couple of years for things to warm up, but we're finding, at least in B2B SaaS, is that events are really kind of they're becoming increasingly important. And the value of a event lead or an event, kind of a meeting at an event versus something that was booked digitally through a chatbot or another channel, particularly for upmarket, is far and away more kind of valuable and cost effective, which is what we're finding. But that's a bit of an aside. In any case, so started with content, distributing the content over demand channels, LinkedIn, Google being the primary ones, at least for us at the time, and then kind of like broadening off into events and, you know, uh, ABM and kind of like at home and things like that. We had our first billboard last year around Snowflake Summit, and we had another one at AWS reInvent. And anyway, so that's kind of the journey that we went on.
Hey, yeah, I appreciated your overview of your team's journey there, going from you creating the category. I loved what you said about a time drawing a strong association between the problems that people were having and your offering and your value proposition, right? When you're creating that category. I kind of want to go back to that because I think category creation is sometimes misunderstood, and people underestimate like the challenges that are inherent there.
Mhm.
Because there's another alternative path, which is to just find latch on to an existing
Yeah.
category and try to uh, identify where you can kind of bolt on to that existing momentum. So I guess, do you recall why you chose to go this hard, arduous like category
Yeah.
creation path versus like trying to latch on to maybe something that existed already?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it's kind of, it's something that literally every marketer, uh, has to grapple with and make the decision to do, because on the one hand, it seems like, oh, new category, bright and shiny, gets, early adopters excited. But on the other hand, it is, to your point, a really arduous journey. It's hard and it doesn't always work. And it's, you can't just decide that you're creating a category. You have to get buy-in from your audience. You have to get buy-in from the broader community. You have to get, validation from third-party sources, whether that's like analysts or G2 or whatever it is. And it was a hard journey. There were moments where I was like, oh my gosh, like, is this going to work? Should we just, become the new Informatica? Like, what are we doing here? Um, but through the content that we put out and kind of the buzz that we were creating about this problem, we identified that like people were really excited about it. It got them really jazzed up, and the way that people were traditionally solving for data quality just was not scaling. It was not working. Like, people were moving to the cloud. People were adopting tools like Snowflake and Databricks, and they were not, in these legacy solutions, or, the alternative of just like do nothing or build it yourself was just like not scaling.
Mm.
So you're
So
like,
we're
okay, yep,
can I ask you a question there? Like,
yeah.
you mentioned like the buzz, and buzz is another word that it's like, do you have it or do you not have it, right? You want to generate this buzz. What were some of the indicators? What to you is buzz, right? Like, and maybe it looks different across categories, but I mean, I think you were speaking a little bit to it there, but what
Mhm.
did that actually look like in practical terms for you at Monte Carlo at that time?
Yeah, so I think it buzz for us was like, are people engaging with the content that we put out? Are they echoing our thoughts and sentiments? Are they citing our founder Bar and our CTO Lior, like in the content that they're writing and on podcasts? Like we went through a whole exercise where we were pitching like all the data uh, focused podcasts, all the,
Mm.
you know, uh, deep tech focused podcasts like Software Engineering Daily. There was like there is a data engineering podcast at the time that's really, really popular, Data Engineering Weekly. Um, and this concept was resonating with people to the point where like our prospects were using our own language to like describe the problem that we were solving, and they were like resonating, they were engaging on LinkedIn, they were like liking things, they were visiting our website. There was just such like a groundswell around it. We were like making sure that our CEO was everywhere. She was at I said podcast, she was at virtual conferences. She keynoted Web Summit, which is this massive like
Mm-hmm.
summit at Lisbon that I can't speak to what it's like now, but like 3 years ago, it was like a very hot place to be. Like just getting the word out there, and it was resonating really well. So oddly enough, before we had HubSpot, before we had Salesforce, we would measure the inbound influence of our marketing by looking at all the likes and engagement and claps on Medium and LinkedIn, which is like such a hacky way to do it. And then we would like write the names of all the people that were engaging with this content in a massive spreadsheet. And then we would like, go and outbound to them. And
Oh my
often it
goodness,
would
this is
work. Yeah.
hilarious to me. This is great. I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, I do have to just mention, I mean, I don't, this is not a podcast about Common Room, but like yeah, we do the same thing now. It's so funny that we're trying to figure out like, hey, do people, is this resonating with people? And instead of, you're talking about the literal analog version of like what we're doing with tools today,
Yeah.
which is great. I just love when
Yes.
I can see like a connection between this is
Yeah.
how we all used to do it. Now there's like, advanced and even better ways and time saving ways. But I love that you're literally like writing down names on a notepad. That's awesome. Anyway,
Yeah. It was very analog. It was very time intensive. I don't know how accurate it was, but it was directionally right.
yeah.
Um, and it was just kind of crazy. And now looking at Hubs, like, with the kind of analytics and automations we have with HubSpot, I'm like, how did we do that? I do not understand. Um, but yeah,
But I guess I'm gonna pause you there. Like,
yeah.
so I think though, I think there might be. Do you think it's still important for people to pay attention to like those upper
Social
funnel metrics,
signals.
those social signals?
Yeah.
Because I think what happens is my perspective is that you get these tools right out of you get to a point where you've got a HubSpot, you've got a Salesforce, you've got these tools that kind of give you these analytics. I mean, are there things that you people are ignoring, do you think, that are actually still valuable because they have so much data availability and be down funnel?
Totally. I mean, I think one thing that I encourage my team to do, and one thing that we did for a very long time, and we still do, and I encourage my team to do, is like go on Reddit, go on LinkedIn. Like, what are people engaging with? Like, whenever we have like, so one thing that my company is known for is we don't take our brand too seriously, like a lot of like B2B SaaS companies where it almost feels like everything is like trying to be open AI. But we use memes are like a really one of our kind of core assets that we share on our company social channels. Our CEO shares them too, our employees share them too. We also write parody songs about the data experience, like the one that we just released this week was it was a parody of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, but it was for like, data analysts. Anyway, so we always go on LinkedIn and we look at the posts and we see how things are performing and what's working, what's not working. And we apply, we'll reuse that content in paid channels. So we kind of use our organic signals to inform what we do on our paid channels, like everything from like content that gets a lot of, recirculation and newsletters and reshares on LinkedIn or Twitter is often the basis of our ads or the basis of webinars that we do later or talks that we have, our co-founders present at conferences. Like it's a really good social signal informs a lot of our paid marketing strategy.
So yeah, I think this often a question is, oh, is this message going to land? Right? That's often a question, right? You're redoing, is it inevitably as a marketer, you've redone your homepage a million times. Maybe not, but like that's my experience. It's like
Yeah,
this
yeah.
homepage is this constantly change, ever evolving thing, and there's always this question of, oh, is our new positioning, our new messaging, is it going to land? Are we striking a chord? So what I hear you saying maybe is that maybe a low um, not low fidelity, but a low effort test is just to literally post a meme that ties back to your core value proposition. And maybe it's not a meme for everybody, but for you, you found that memes do a good job at, tying some emotion to your value prop, and then you can kind of
Yeah.
identify, hey, does that resonate with people? Does that get people to react? Because that's ultimately what you're looking for, right?
Yep, exactly. Exactly. So, an example of this, one of our most successful memes is, I don't know if you remember this meme that was going around. It was like this little girl, like with a very, like a smirk on her face, and there's like a fire. Her house is on fire in the
Oh,
background.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that one, we applied it to like the idea of like, um, your data pipeline breaking and then like causing a, quote unquote fire in your data warehouse. And that resonated so well. Like that hit really, really well. To the point where we like we turned it into stickers that we would hand out at conferences. We put it on we put it in demand generation ads on LinkedIn, and other like, we use this third party ad network called Influ2 where you can do like one-to-one contacting, and we leverage
Yes.
them there. Um, anyway, so we were kind of like lean into what works, right? Like why
Yeah.
you should not be boiling the ocean to try to find some elusive, incredible brand message. Just lean into what works, even if it's kind of scrappy and it's not perfect. Because if you can if you can understand someone's pain, then that gets you so far as a marketer, because people are they respond to pain, fear, kind of like existential dread of like, oh no, like if I don't do this, my data
Mhm.
pipeline will be like this. Or like, oh no, my data pipeline is like this. Or, the kind of the art of the possible of like, oh, like if I had this, my data pipelines wouldn't be like this. So yeah, all that is to say, like, we love our memes and we use them at every chance we get.
Got it. No, I didn't mean to like get you hyper focused on memes, but like I do think for me, what I'm kind of hearing and learning from you here is that especially in category creation, it's important to hyper focus on resonate, like getting
Mhm.
like emotional resonance with your problem. And identifying what does evoke emotional resonance, right? Like not just logical resonance, like not the it makes sense, but yes, it needs to make sense, but like it has to really strike a chord. And it seems like you've done a good job there at Monte Carlo from an early stage of simultaneously helping connecting with people's pain
Mhm.
and getting them to almost like laugh at their condition or chuckle at their condition, right? Or possibly sob. I don't know. We don't know what the people are doing on the other side of the screen, but like really like connect with that, and then tying it to your value proposition. That represents as like a transition point, right? Like, so in the early days, you said you didn't even have a website, and then you started capturing this demand. Tell me about that. Like, how did your content maybe shift at all, if it did, as you moved from let's just like talk about, let's just be thought leaders, and then shifting to let's capture that demand. Like, how did that?
Yeah,
What did that shift look like for you guys?
sure. So we didn't change so we changed the kind of like strategy a bit, in that we started doing, gated content and things that would
Mm,
help us capture intent. We use this tool called Path Factory. That's like a kind of middle gate
hmm
content repository. Um, and so what we did is we would continue to write about the topics that our audience cared about, even if it wasn't directly related to data quality or technology. Like one of our top articles in terms of SEO and page views was this article about what the heck is a data mesh. At the time, a data mesh was like this very technical concept that basically was like, it's like a way of structuring your data architecture and building quote unquote data products. It's like super technical and like, beyond me really. But it was something that resonated really well. And so we wrote about how to build a data mesh, why it's important, blah, 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 going on and on and on about that. Then at the very end of those articles, it would be like, if you want a reliable data mesh, or if you want to build a data mesh like with data observability in mind, like talk to us. But 90% of the content was just focused on the actual topic of the data mesh. And so we replicated that with a lot of different topics, like building data platforms, building data products, like things that were resonating with our audience and like brought them value and education. And then at the end, it's like a very specific tie-in, obviously, with your tool, which is, kind of how we were able to be successful. But then we started gating that content, and putting together like ebooks and cheat sheets and like all sorts of things. We did like surveys with Wakefield Research and other kind of things. We also wrote a book with O'Reilly on data quality, which actually was not intended to be a gated asset initially. It was really just, my CEO was reached out to write this book because she was writing so much about data quality. And so they were like, oh, you know what you're talking about. And so then like we wrote the book together. And so at first it was just a resource we'd hand out at conferences, and it like built credibility. And then it was like, oh, you can like source this, and like you can license this. And so it was our top performing piece of content for many years. And so once you kind of understand the audience, you understand the pain, you describe you portray the art of the possible to them, then you could kind of start capturing that, and they're more willing to trust you, and they're like, okay, like I want to learn more, or like, okay, I want to get more content, or I want to sign up for your newsletter.
Got it. So you kind of you start with the pain, and then what you described to me was various use cases or workflows that
Mhm.
your audience would naturally see themselves in, right?
Yes.
You're building a data mesh, for example, right? Is like something that's on their mind. They're going to be doing that, right? You want to make sure that you nonchalantly at the end of that suggest that, hey, like here's how we can maybe plug into your life to make it
Mhm.
better, right?
Mhm.
Um, love that transition from deep pain to let's think through the different use cases, and then you introducing yourself from that perspective, as opposed to like flipping that on its head, where you're kind of jamming yourself into their life,
Yeah.
so to speak. So um, really great insights there. Uh, I can nerd out with you on that for a while. However, we do want to move along with our conversation. Um, I would love to hear maybe there's maybe one or two topics that we
Yeah.
can go into. And in fact, I'll give you the option. I'd love to maybe two things. One, practical uses of AI in demand
Mhm.
gen. I know that definitely a content play there, but would love to hear just generally how that's going. Or we could chat about another phenomenon that maybe not a phenomenon, but it's something that's certainly a trend that I'm seeing, is this concept of a founder-led marketing. You spoke to it a little bit with your CEO there at Monte Carlo. Um, why is that happening? What are some practical experiences you've had with that founder-led growth and content flywheel? Do
Yeah.
any of those strike your fancy? Do you want to kind of combine them? I just love to hear
Yeah.
maybe your perspective on one, or kind of a mesh of the two.
For sure. Yeah, I could speak a bit to, I think the latter I definitely have a lot of experience in. And the former, like again, I mentioned Angeline.
Hmm.
And so well, I'll say really briefly, one of the most I guess beneficial uses of AI for our team has been this concept of, I mean, a chatbot. It sounds kind of boring, right? Because AI is being, one of the most common use cases of generative AI is a chatbot. But I was a little bit skeptical. I was kind of like, I don't know if this is actually going to bring us value. Like, this just kind of seems like a cool demo. And they were like, it was this company called Qualified, and they were like explaining to me like how it worked and whatever, and I was like, okay, like sure. And then Angeline and her team were like convinced that this would be a huge uplift for us, like chatbot conversions, like converted chatbot conversations that started on our chatbot converted really well. But the issue we were seeing is that if people were pinging us at like an off hour, no one was responding to them because the SDRs weren't available to take their calls and answer their questions, and there's only so much that you can do with these canned responses. So um, we rolled out this AI chatbot. Um, I think it's called Piper or something like that. And like, this is not like a promotion of the product. I'm not really like, Angeline is definitely has been working more with the qualified team than I have. But since we've implemented Piper, we've seen like a 30% uplift in conversions on the chatbot channel. So that's been huge. So that's an area of AI that I would encourage people to I've always been an AI skeptic. Sometimes I use, OpenAI to generate very or ChatGPT to generate very basic if I need ideas for like a booth design, or if I want to write my kids' preschool applications, like things where I'm like, I just need like a head start here. But this was an area where I think AI was like hugely impactful for us. And then going back to your question about like founder-led marketing or founder-led selling, I've, kind of since starting at Monte Carlo, it's something that I've noticed more and more companies doing. And I think that, I don't want to say that we were some of the, one of the earlier companies to do it, but it's definitely something that we leaned into really heavily, and it tied directly to our category creation efforts. If you don't have a face behind the category or a face behind, whatever problem you're trying to talk about, or kind of like a pitch you're trying to give, it's not as successful. Like there are some B2C brands that I think do a pretty good job of building like a brand where it's like, oh, this is funny, or I respect this, or whatever. But it takes a lot of time to do, and you have to be really like, you have to spend a lot of money on like brand and like awareness campaigns and Super Bowl commercials. And, if you think about like like Jack in the Box, Jack in the Box is one of our customers. I'm a huge fan of them. I grew up in Southern California. They're based there. They're in San Diego, I think. But in any case, they have a very distinct brand identity. It's like the Jack in the Box.
Mhm.
And again, that's that is, not that Jack in the Box is a founder, but it's like a person and it's a thing, like very, very closely associated with the brand. Or when you think about Burger King, it's the King, or McDonald's, it's Ronald McDonald's. Like they all have like a mascot, or like not the founder, but like someone who's like very, very much part of their marketing persona, and it builds credibility. It builds like a friendly face. And I would say a lot of the startups that I've seen be more successful have like a very public CEO or CTO who kind of is a valuable resource for their customers and their prospects, versus just kind of being like a figurehead. Like they're actually like, meeting with the customers, they're writing content with the customers, they're like doing all these things. And Bar did that a lot very early at Monte Carlo, and it was massively successful. And now whenever we talk to like prospects, we're always like, hey, how'd you hear from us? What are, we want to understand what channels are working. And anecdotally, like always, it's like, oh, well, I really like Bar's content. I really trust Bar because of like her thought leadership. I saw her speak at Snowflake Summit. Like, and that's kind of the entry point to some of these customers.
Got it. Yeah. So I think that it's no secret that some leaders and founders are predisposed to be a face, right? To be out there, to want to engage. And there are others, in some cases, who you don't feel as comfortable posting or as comfortable being on
Yeah.
perpetually like online or those types of things. In the former case, it feels like a relatively natural thing to do. It just organically happens, where it's founder led content, right?
Yeah.
Founder driven, founder led content, and then maybe there's this other side, which is like, who does the driving? Does it work? Is it possible? What would you suggest to companies,
Yeah.
to marketing leaders who are saying, "Gosh, dang, like I would really want to make this happen," but they get pushback from whether it's
Yeah.
that
From
founder or
their
the
founders.
CEO. Like
Yeah.
that is, I think that's a thing that happens sometimes.
I would say, for B2B SaaS, hire a field CTO.
Mm.
I know hiring, like, I'm not really an advocate for hiring's sake or throwing bodies at a problem, but I strongly believe that, like, you will expedite your sales cycle. You will, like, open new doors if you have someone, versus, like, it's a little bit different when you have an open source tool, where it's like, hey, like, you build trust, you build credibility because you have this tool that's free and anyone can use it, and you build credibility that way. But if it's a sales led motion, it's a little bit harder to do that. um I would say, like, you can also outsource this to other people on the team. Gong is a really strong example of this. They had, I'm sure you're familiar with Devin Reeder and like his whole, he's kind of like the king of like social selling. He's not the CEO or co-founder, but he kind of assumed the mantle of being like the public face of Gong. Um, and I think that like when you're doing B2B SaaS, particularly sales led motion, you really need to have someone who drives that forward, even if it's not your
Yeah,
founders.
I loved your. I think it seems like a minor point, but I think it's an important one in the distinction you're making between, in your case, you said open source, and in the non-open source world, where it might be your product-led companies
Mm.
people who can, end
Yes.
users can adopt and just develop
Yep.
a love for your offering.
Yes. Yeah.
Be,
Like a data dog or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
a Datadog, a Monday.com,
Yeah.
whatever, wherever it is, like getting started on your own, right? Monday.com might not be a great example. It's multiplayer, but I understand your point. On the other side, though, if you don't have that, I think it's a good point that you need to build trust, right? One way to build trust is to prove it, right? Prove it. Like we'll
Yeah.
prove to you that we can make your life better. And but sans being able to just prove it, well, how else do you do that? Well, you do that with a figurehead, somebody who can just be that person having a casual fireside chat, so to speak, with
Yeah.
thousands or millions of people, depending on your audience size, and becoming that trusted advisor, that trusted
Yeah.
voice, that person that they turn to for advice, right?
Exactly.
Is really like what they need to become. So I really love that point, and I think that's probably a good one to maybe end on. Um, I would say maybe one last question on like any last, um, I guess content has changed a whole bunch.
Hmm.
I guess the role that content is playing, the types of pieces of content that work, the jobs that content needs to do, maybe they've changed. I guess over the past 5 years or so, what has maybe changed the most with respect to content's role and the job that it needs to do within like the whole demand creation and capture cycle? And maybe what are the underlying principles that you just think are evergreen and haven't changed? I think we can all get caught up in
Ooh,
these hype
yeah.
cycles, and
Uh-huh.
would love to hear your perspective on that, and then we can finish off.
Yeah. I mean, I think like you mentioned AI earlier, and I think one of the biggest areas that marketers have uh, thought or have not even thought, but have been using AI is to generate content, right? Like, you can use AI, use ChatGPT, you can use like, I think Otter AI is another, like, there's a bunch of different tools that you can use to generate content with AI. Like, you put some inputs in of like what you want it to write about, and it pops up whatever. And that can get you so far, but there will always need to be a human in the loop to make sure to bring it up a couple levels. Like I would say
Mm.
quality trumps quantity always. Like you could generate like 10 ebooks with ChatGPT. And yeah, you'll get some results. People will download it, people will click on it if you have like a buzzy title. But the people that actually stop to read it, like, is it going to get them value? Like, probably not as much as someone who is like a subject matter expert, like actually either writing the content or taking the content that the GPT writes and making it better. I would say quality always trumps quantity. That's the same with like SEO or anything. Like we find that like the 5 articles are the pieces that generate the most traffic to our blog, and we have hundreds of blog articles. As an example, like the topics that resonate the most with our webinars, like they will always be the topics that that get the most people to RSVP, and we host like dozens of webinars every year. Or so I would focus on like really trying to do something, really try to do one, two things really, really well, really focus on quality over quantity, and that will
Mm.
get you like 90% of your results.
Really appreciate that. I think that's sage, really good advice. Um, yeah, I will definitely be even thinking about that myself as we. Yeah, I think most teams out there, whether you're even in marketing, sales, wherever you are, you're thinking about how do we use AI to improve my workflow, to improve our content. and understanding. And then there's the relationship between AI and humans, and it's a touchy subject, and it's something that we are all concerned about in one way or another, in the
Mhm.
broadest sense of the term concerned.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's really, really great advice. Before we wrap up, I have two questions for you, Molly.
Mhm.
Um, First question, what's maybe a marketing secret that you've learned and incorporated that you've seen has led to outsized results?
Mhm. Memes. No. Um, that's a good question. I would say, well, besides memes, I would probably say like simplicity. Simplicity of message is key. I think when you're building a category, like I think that there's a tendency for more technical marketers and when you're marketing a more technical product to try to um touch on every little thing that your product does to differentiate it from the competition. But by doing that, you lose sight of what makes it, of what makes it special and unique when you're trying to like one up all of your, competitors. So I would say like simplicity is key when it comes to messaging. Is
Hmm,
would yeah is
got
what
it.
I would say.
Got it. And then what's a strongly held belief, or like a hill you're willing to die on, with respect to marketing strategy, go-to-market execution?
Hire a brand designer earlier than you think you need one.
Ooh, that's interesting. That's a hot take. I think people would that's what I wanted. Uh,
Yes.
one follow-up to that. What's
Yeah.
the simple like TLDR why? Like what's the implication if
Uh,
you don't potentially?
well, at Monte Carlo for a very it's not the case anymore, but for a very long time, everyone on the marketing team was living in Canva, and there was, just like I'm a proponent of like not I think being scrappy and being fast is super important when you're a startup, but you reach a certain point and you can only use that image of a computer screen so many times before you're like, okay, I need to support here. So yeah, I would say hire a brand designer just before you think you need one, because when you really need one, you're gonna be in like, significant design debt. And not to say that Monte Carlo was in that it was in that place. I think every company deals with it to a certain extent, and in in some ways, like we're proud of this. Everyone now is like very fluent in Canva, but I think particularly as you mature, there's so much can be said with a good simple slogan and a really good design.
Love it. Well, on your last two questions, what's clear is you want to keep it simple. So I have. It's been a lot of fun just having this conversation. Would love to have another hour on this conversation. So much that I could even learn from you. So thank you for sharing your time, your perspectives with us. Uh, how can people find you? And yeah, how can they best reach you if they have questions or
Yeah.
follow-ups?
Definitely. I'm on LinkedIn, Molly Vorwerck. There's not many of us, so you'll find me pretty quickly. I also am at mvorwerk at montecarlodata.com if anyone has questions or wants to reach out. And fun fact, we are actually hiring a brand designer. So if anyone knows one, please that you respect and love, please feel free to reach out.
There you go. Molly, thank you so much for your time today, and I hope to catch up sometime soon in another strain. So thank you.
Likewise, thank you so much.
Yep. Bye bye.